February 28th, 2024, and it is 4:36. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Hold on. I get stuff up. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Item number 2 is public comment. I don't know if we have anybody for public comment. Love you people.
I don't see any, Lucy.
No, I think it's just us that are on anyway. There's only 11 people. Okay. We'll go to item number 3, approval of the agenda. I need a motion to approve the agenda. I'll move to approve
So
the
moved.
agenda.
Second.
Okay. Do we want to move any of the items around, or we're going to take it as is? We're okay? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Okay, great.
Deb, could you email me that link and then I'll paste it in the chat? It won't let me copy it.
Okay, we'll go to item number 4, the EL update and the middle school discussion.
So I'll start and then Deb, I'll give you some time. So I will start with professional learning, and then I wanted to talk about KIDM a little bit because I know that there were some questions around that. And then I'll let Deb kind of give the overview of the data, and then we can have the discussion about grade 6. So for professional learning, as we mentioned at the last meeting, teachers had time on February 16th, and a lot of them decided to use that time to collaborate, which is really what they've been asking for at this point. I did receive some feedback of appreciation just to be able to have that time to work together to look over the upcoming modules. And so they used that time very effectively. Coaches continue to receive one-to-one coaching. Deb is actually one of the coaches that is receiving that one-to-one coaching. So we had mentioned that at the last meeting. And if Deb wanted to speak to that a little bit, or if you had any questions about that, I'm sure she wouldn't mind doing so. And then the coaches and I do continue to have conversations about discussions that are happening during TLC time and just work that we need to do moving forward for next year in order to continue to meet the needs of our learners. So as far as KIDM is concerned, so KIDM is our online platform that we use in grades K through 5 for the EL literacy program. Basically, this platform is available for both teachers and students. At the younger grades, however, it's more being used by the teachers just because our kids are not really there yet, ready to use that kind of a platform. But basically, first, from like a teacher's perspective, the platform has a ton of different resources, a lot more resources that can be found in the teacher's manuals that we purchased. And in addition to that, that platform is continuously being updated with improvements, and they are getting that information from EL themselves, who are getting their information from feedback that they gather from teachers. So that is really a platform that is continuously being updated with improvements. If we didn't have that, then we either wouldn't know about these updates or improvements, or we would have to continuously repurchase teacher editions year after year just to get those updates. And they're not huge updates, but they're nice updates to have. Teachers also have the ability, there's a ton of embedded activities within the platform, and teachers have the ability to basically take the activities. They can either use those activities or develop their own, and they can differentiate them as many times as they want. And then they can push those out to the learners. And those students would be basically receiving whichever specific lesson or activity that the teacher pushed out to them. So it's not necessarily everybody's getting the same thing. Teachers can provide immediate feedback on the assignments that are within the platform, and they could also watch learners working in real time. So if you have a small group of students that are working on something in the platform, the teacher on their end on the computer screen has something. I'm not sure if everybody or anybody knows what GoGuardian is, but it's basically you're able to see the screen of the student and see what they're doing. And so, if the teacher notices that the learners are struggling, they can go over and really help and support them immediately. Or maybe if we have some kiddos that are really shy and nervous to ask questions, that's a really good way for the teacher to kind of be able to see what they're doing in real time. Teachers can also leave recorded directions or messages through the platform for the learners. So again, if you're thinking of a bunch of small groups, if you want a group to get working independently, they can pre-record these activities, and the learners can just go on and listen to it and get started right away while the teacher might be preoccupied with another group. Students also have the ability to listen to lessons. So there's a text-to-speech component to it, and they can also submit their work right through the platform itself. And there's also embedded assessments, unit assessments, and basically teachers are able to grade and provide feedback right on the platform, but on the other end of it, teachers receive a very nice breakdown of the data from those assessments. They can break it down as far as standards and really see where are the areas of strength with these standards that they just covered, and where are those areas that they need to maybe continue to reinforce and continue to work on before moving further. So they really get some nice data. I did have a conversation with our representative last month, or it might have been in January. That is last month. Yep, we're not at March yet. In January, I had a conversation with him just as a mid-year report, kind of to see what our activity has been like, what our usage report is. He was very impressed with our usage report. He stated that he really has never seen such high activity so early on using a new platform. And that's mainly because when you are introduced with the new platform, people are nervous. It might not be something they dive into right away. But he did report that 75 teachers, and this was in January again, so it could have changed, but 75 teachers have been accessing the content pages, and 61 were accessing the presentation and slide decks, which I should have said that they also have those embedded in that platform, and the teachers have the ability to modify those as they need. And 249 students have been active in the platform itself. So that's basically what that platform is, how it's used. Again, our teachers in grades K through 2 use it quite often just to be able to access those resources and basically pull those presentations and again, modify them as they see fit. And then our older students, our teachers with our older learners are more so using it with the students themselves. So that is Kiddom. That is Kiddom in a very short blurb. It does so much. I was very impressed when I saw the platform just because of how many different features there are to it. I've never seen one single platform that encompassed that many things. And so now I'll shift to the data discussion, and then I'll let Deb, share her presentation. So we continue to move forward.
Are you all right asking
Yeah.
you're right if I ask a question?
Absolutely, yes.
On that, Kiddom, how do we feel that the assessments for it, are they meeting the kids at the grade level that they currently are?
They
So,
are. Go ahead, Deb.
You want me to
ahead.
answer it? So
Yes.
Lindsay, the one big takeaway for me for Kiddom and why it's so useful is I'm going to explain in my presentation how students are put into microphases based on their benchmark assessment. And the microphases are competency based, right? So there's a grade level expectation gauge kind of attached, but we're in a competency based approach for the microphases. So there might be a second grade teacher who has a student who's working in a first grade microphase, or a skill that would be more on the progression and the competencies of a first grade. And so they are able through Kiddom access those resources. I have first grade teachers whose students are working on second grade continuum skills and kindergarten skills, right? And so instead of purchasing K1 and 2 resources for each teacher in the district, they can access that very easily through Kiddom. So that's one of the big things that we use. I use it daily. I probably know it better than I know my family at this point, but that's just me.
And then as far as the assessments for the content assessments, the module assessments for the older kids, they're very good assessments. I mean, they're just like any other assessment. They could be beefed up a little bit more, you know, away from like a recall kind of. But one of the things that's really nice about those as well is the teacher does have the ability to also go in and modify that. So they can take it, they can make a copy of it, they can keep the original if they want to, but then they can also take it and modify it just like they can with the lessons themselves. So if they felt like they were too rigorous, then they can go in and they can, you know, differentiate them a little bit. And then again, they can create various assessments for different learners sitting in that classroom. So that way they're really able to differentiate it and still cover those standards that need to be assessed.
Mhm.
What's the cost for the platform?
So it's pricey. It is about a little over $5,000 per elementary school right now. And then, do you recall if is that the middle school price? Is that for the whole school that's sixth grade, right? So right now we did get a quote for sixth grade, which is a little over $3,000. But my thinking is if we were to get it for the whole middle school, it would probably be about the same cost.
Mm-hmm.
And what
I can send you the full spreadsheet on that, but it looks like for K, for like each school, it's about, you know, between 13 and 16,000, and then Strong, you know, was just over 13 between the texts and the courses and Kiddom.
I'm not sure which spreadsheet you're looking at, but I don't think it was that per school.
No, but with EL and Kiddom combined.
Oh, combined, yes, because
Yeah, if you're just asking for Kiddom, I think it was 6,000 on Lyman,
Right.
5,900 on Memorial, and Strong's was just 3,240 for those. I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like there's one. Oh no, there is. So it's the same. It's just a little bit under that for Brewster.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Liza. She said it's about 3,000 per grade level. That's what it comes out to be.
I'd be happy to meet with anybody, you know, who wants to navigate Kiddom with me if you have questions, to show you how it works.
Yeah,
Probably
I'd
not-
love to
today's
sit
not
down
the
and just take a
platform.
look at it. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'd love to look through it with you, Deb.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you for your questions. And I think Deb, if you're ready,
I'm ready.
we can move on to you. Did everybody get Deb's? Oh, yes, Jamie.
Ooh. Who remembers that? I presume it does have the ability for you administrators to be able to collect data that
So
helps you do your presentations for these student achievement meetings. I mean, yes, it's a valuable tool to have the dashboards and so on.
Right. So currently we don't have. Okay, I'm going to explain this really quickly. So what Deb is about to share with you is data, an overall idea of how the data looks, the trends for our benchmark assessments for K-2 skills block. That is not included in the Kiddom platform as of yet. However, we did create individual data sheets where teachers can input the information, the data from each assessment, and then it populates. So we do have access to that. As far as the assessment as a district-wide, that is a feature that is becoming available in the fall. So it's a fairly new platform. So that's what I say. They're constantly getting feedback, they're constantly getting input, and they're constantly making changes to their platform based on what we're asking them to improve upon with the program. All right, Deb, did everybody get the
Is
presentation?
everybody able to open up the? Yep. Okay, great. So if you go to slide 2, I just thought it would be helpful to look at what the components of the EL benchmark assessment are. These are the K2 reading skill block assessments. So these are your RF standards, like your foundational standards. Our RIs, RLs, language, speaking and listening are all encompassed in the content module, which is a different resource than our skills block. So today I'm just gonna navigate the skills block. We teach and instruct the RI and RL and all those other standards at the elementary school, but we're pretty heavily focused on the foundational
I'm at a
standards.
meeting. I'll call you later.
Yeah.
So,
You're unmuted.
So,
Liz.
yeah, so
Sorry.
the different components are, letter ID and letter sound. So are they able to identify the letter name, and are they able to identify the letter sound? They ask for uppercase letters as well as lowercase letters, and the sound component, the sound association that goes with each. The second component of the Yale benchmark assessment is a phonological awareness, and that's all auditorily. That's, can they rhyme? Can they isolate initial phoneme sounds, medial phoneme sounds, ending phoneme sounds? Can they do syllable deletions? So that's phonological awareness. Spelling or the encoding assessment, there's a decoding component to it, and then there's also a fluency. So it's all the components of structured literacy. Slide 3. So each grade level has a assessment path for the year. The one that you're looking at on slide 3 is the path for kindergarten. The bolded assessments are the required, and then the ones that are not bolded are suggested. So even though the phonological awareness was not bolded, we think it's very important, and so we did administer that beginning of the year and middle of the year. The suggested subtests that are not bolded are because it's competency based, not all of your students at the middle of the year in kindergarten might be ready for that decoding assessment, but the ones who are, we administer it. So that's the pathway for the kindergarten. If you go to slide 4, that's the pathway for grade 1. Grade 1, I would say, has the most trickiness, I guess, at the beginning of the year, because you have a wide range of abilities for incoming first grade students. So they have like an if-then path, right? So you start out with an encoding assessment, and based on that, the outcome of that and the microphase that the student falls within, you either move on to the decoding subtest, or you might go back to the letter name and sound, and also the phonological awareness. So what we're really searching for is the most critical need of that student, and then beginning with the skill instruction at that level. Fluency starts in grade passage 2 at the middle of the year for grade 1. Passage slide 5 talks about the pathway for second grade. So they start with the spelling. There's different lists based on the microphases where you would start for first grade and where you would start for second grade, or where you would start with kindergarten. If a student is successful at a particular microphase with spelling or decoding, then you go to the next word list. The thing that I really like about the competency-based part of this is, even if I move, so if a student is successful at a partial alphabetic list and you move to a full, they might not be achieving like goal at that full level. But when you look at the error analysis, you could really hone in on what skills in particular they have, what are their strengths, and then what are their weaknesses, and then what are we teaching into. So it really gives a lot of information for teachers for next steps. I think my favorite part of the benchmark assessment, and what has really helped us at the K2 level, is the conversion chart. And I know it's small, but I gave you a link within there to open it up so that you can look at it in a bigger version.
I was just going to say that, Deb, you read my mind.
Yeah, it's small.
Perfect.
So when you look at the conversion chart, so after teachers administer the assessments. And part of the reason why we don't administer assessments and KIDM at the elementary grades in K1, a lot of our assessments are more interview based, right? So it's kind of a one-on-one. So if you look at, you could see the microphases. So there's pre-alphabetic, partial alphabetic, full alphabetic, and consolidated. And those microphases were developed by Dr. Airy, and they're grounded in research in the science of reading. And then each microphase has an early, a middle, and a late. And if you can see the end of pre-alphabetic, it has a GKM1. So that correlates to grade 1, module 1. There's 4 modules. And within each module, it took me like a whole year to understand this. So I'm sorry if I'm going quickly, but so each module has cycles, and then within each cycle, specific skills are being introduced, then and then correlating to that small group instruction. So if you look at kindergarten, there's time in module 1 and 2 spent on explicit instruction around letter name, letter sound, that the letter name sound association. Then they move into the partial alphabetic phase, is the phase that we're working in currently in kindergarten, where we start introducing digraphs, short vowels, and then we'll move into the middle, which is kind of the close to the end of the expectation for grade K. That's all short vowels, digraphs, am, an, ink, ink, and then the floss rule. So so KIDM allows teachers, there's another document called the cycle planner. So if I have a student in kindergarten who's already working on short vowels, I can go into the cycle planner and pull up a lesson for that student in their small group, which is targeted instruction around the skills that that student needs. We also might have some students that are in earlier middle pre-alphabetic. When they come in, they're still working on those, those ELDS standards. They're still recognizing the letters in their name. So even though they're in kindergarten and there's less of a discrepancy at the beginning of the year, there still is a little bit of wiggle room there. Any questions about the conversion chart or anything so far?
My one question so far is, so you mentioned that some the kindergarten students are taking the decoding benchmark assessment. What data, because you use the phrase when they're ready, what data decides whether they're ready to take that benchmark or not?
So, if they have 52 out of 52 letters and sounds,
Cool.
then, and we're starting to segment and we're starting to blend, we give it a try, right? And so,
Great.
and some are very successful. And then others aren't. And then we work more on the short vowels. The medial sounds are usually what the hang up is. Those vowels are tricky. And so we continue to work on that.
Great, thank you.
I must say that each cycle, so each one of those skills is in a cycle, and each cycle is about 5 lessons long. And at the end of the cycle, there is in first grade and in second grade a cycle assessment. There's a snapshot assessment in kindergarten. So there's an opportunity built right into the lessons for you to assess your students and how are things going, and constantly pivoting and changing based on the data. The other thing that's been working really well for us is there's a real direct correlation between our intervention students and what their goal is and what the goal is that the students are working on with the classroom teacher. So they really seem to align based on the microphase, which has been very helpful for classroom teachers because they're collecting data on what they're instructing, and then that's the goal that's matching their intervention. And then we could see their growth and how they're moving along.
Well, since you mentioned intervention, I'll throw in my next one of my questions now is, right, one of the powers of this kind of a program is that it can make intervention be a lot more flexible and nimble, right? So kids go in and they come out. Have you all been able to start creating that system, or do you have plans to start creating that system so that it is this micro phase, the kids get the support in this one skill that they're lacking, and then they come back to the classroom and it is a revolving door, but not in a bad way, right? Where the kids are
It
out,
is.
out and in.
Yeah, I would say, you know, we're new, right? We've only been using it a very short time, so that's my hope.
Yeah.
I'd say it's more of a transient population in kindergarten. You know, I run a program called KIP, which is kind of like a tier 1 program for the Ks. And so I have kids, students, learners coming in and out of KIP constantly. You know, they need a little more help with their letter sounds, and so we drill that for a little bit, and we give them some lessons and some explicit instruction and targeted instruction, and then they go out until they meet the digraphs, and then they come back, you know.
Right, great.
So it is,
so many-
yeah.
So many kids just get stuck, right, in intervention. And one of the things that this kind of a platform will allow for is for that to not happen, so that kids
Yeah.
get the support they need when they need it, rather than a perpetual exclusion to the intervention.
Right.
thank
And I think it might take a little time for us to see
course.
that, you know.
Yep.
Yeah. So I put together just some trends. I looked at the grade level data in K1 and 2. It's hard to, like I said, it's new, right? We've only been using it since September. It's a learning curve for teachers, it's a learning curve for students, it's a learning curve for myself. So I looked at some trends that I'm seeing in the data. I think they're very positive. In kindergarten, the growth in letter name and letter sound, both uppercase and lowercase, there's been significant growth. We've had students go from knowing 8 letters to now knowing all 52, and that's the same for the sounds. They've also made a lot of gains in the phonological awareness, the rhyme production, isolating initial phoneme, final phoneme, adding a phoneme and deleting a phoneme, and blending. They're currently working on isolating that medial sound and segmenting and blending. So that's kind of where we are. And I would say that that's the next trend that we're hoping to look at and see growth in that area, because that's the direct instruction that's happening in the explicit instruction right now in the classroom. Any questions about kindergarten? No. Some trends that I'm seeing in first grade, students are moving from the partial alphabetic to the full alphabetic, microphase in spelling, which is great because the encoding historically or typically the decoding is easier for students than the encoding, right? It's easier to pick words up off the page than to think of all the ways that we could write them. So that shows me that the application of explicitly taught skills, they're applying those. So that's always the next step, is they know the skill, they know the strategy, but are they using, is the application piece there? They've grown in their decoding skills. In the beginning of the year, most of the students were in the middle partial alphabetic, and now most of our learners are in the early to middle full. The interesting thing, and I think what we need to keep cognizant of, and I remind the teachers of this all the time, you know, when you hear that a student has moved from like an early full alphabetic to a middle full alphabetic, you're like, that's one box. But then if you look at all of the skills and cycles that are in that box, it's a lot of growth and a lot of skills that they've been able to master. I'd say that grade 1 right now is currently continuing to work on encoding and bringing in that fluency piece. EL's philosophy, as well as mine, is that, you know, students aren't ready to really work on that fluency if they're working so hard on the decoding, right? So when we do assess their fluency, there's different leveled passages. You pick and select a passage based on their decoding word list so that it's a decodable passage for them, so that when you're giving them decodable passage, you really are assessing fluency and comprehension and not decoding. Any questions about first grade? My chair, the piston on my chair broke, and I keep shrinking all day long. I'm just gonna pull it up a second, sorry. And they tell me they can't fix it.
It's like an amusement park ride.
I know, I keep getting shorter. You're like up here. And then grade. Go
Deb,
ahead.
I do have a question. As we're looking at all this, those of us who are teachers understand phonemes and decoding and CVC words and stuff like that, but there are other board members, and who do not have that background, and maybe if you could, as you're going through, just explain what that means. What does that look like? You know, for
Sure.
athletic, you know, just as.
Yeah, I'll go
well.
back to first grade because that's where I threw out, I think, a lot of those words. No, kindergarten, actually. So rhyme production, right? If I give you a word, can you give me another word that rhymes with it? It's adding an initial phoneme sound. So or deleting an initial phoneme. So that initial phoneme sound is that first sound that you hear at the beginning of a word. Are you able to isolate it? If I said to you the word sun, are you able to tell me that sun begins with a s sound, and then can you then tell me that S makes this sound, right? Um, are you able to blend those phonemes? Segment and blend is really where we are right now. So if you look at the word cat, right? Are they able to segment those phonemes? Can they say at and then blend it to say the word cat? And then are they able to apply that to their writing? So that's kind of what we're working on. CVC words are just like short vowel sounds, short vowel words like consonant, vowel, consonant. And that's what's happening in kindergarten. Lucy, did I mention any of those words in first grade? I don't think I did. Just the microphases. Encoding is spelling, and fluency is your ability to read a text with accuracy and automaticity. So are they reading it at a rate of speed that you know, kind of sounds like talking? Are they able to comprehend? Do they have inflection in their voice? You know, and are they able to use that fluency to understand the passage and do the comprehension? And in second grade, they're moving in encoding as well as decoding, and we're currently working on encoding. So the skills in second grade, you know, they really up the ante in second grade. So some of the things that our second grades are working on are those vowel teams. So when you hear the word coat, is that C-O-T-E? Is it C-O-A-T? Like, what's making that sound? They're talking about shun and shun, when to use T-I-O-N and S-I-O-N. They're thinking about, you know, when do I use a C-K and or just a K or just a C at the end of the word? You know, schwa, they're talking about compound words. So there's really a lot of skills that are included in the encoding piece of second grade. And so they're working on encoding, they're working on fluency to increase their fluency. Their fluency is assessed by their word count per minute and also their accuracy. And then they're given some comprehension questions that again are more in an interview, right? And are they able to get to the gist of the passage and convey their thinking to their teacher? So that's basically EL benchmark assessment in a nutshell, K2, and how we kind of navigate and use that data to guide instruction. And it's constantly we're constantly assessing, and not in a bad way. We're assessing through those cycles. At the end of the cycles, it's built right into the lessons, and then we're pivoting with students based on that.
I'm wondering if it's possible to get the actual data rather than, sorry, excuse me, rather than the interpretation of the data. I mean, I'd be interested to see what percentages of kids are making
I think we're gonna get that next month.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're gonna find the best way to compile that, because the hard part about it right now is the fact that we only have 2 cycles of assessments. And as you heard Deb say, a lot of these assessments are done and they're competency based. So there might be kids that are not yet ready to take certain assessments. So where we might have data for one child that shows maybe an assessment done beginning and middle, we might not see that with another. And so we're just trying to wrap our heads around what's the best way to share that with you, since it is so personalized and based on competency level. It's going to look very different from what you're probably used to seeing, you know, with SBAC and iReady and other data.
Does it report out the, like, so does it set a goal for the kids? And then, like, I know iReady, which is problematic, but you know, it'll set a certain goal. And then you find out what percentage of kids made the goal, that their individualized goal. Does this platform
Like-
do something similar?
Like a norm you're talking, do they give?
Well, so like if they're saying, okay, this child came in at, and as we know, I'm not a elementary teacher, so I can't even quote Lexile levels and stuff like
It's
that.
okay.
But a kid comes in at a certain spot, and then the computer or the platform says, you know what, this child, hello, Piper. Yeah, there's 4 dogs here. I apologize. That this child with the proper, instruction should be able to get to, this level, and then it tracks that. Now, again, I'm not saying we do that. I'm asking if the platform does that already. It's dinner time. That's why they're so angry.
It is dinner time.
What were you gonna say
So I
something?
guess, Linda, the answer to that question is because it's competency based, they're moving at and being introduced to a new skill. And then again, the skills are introduced strategically based on the science of reading and what they say the next progression, right? Just like OG is, and just like EL is. So there are, when I administer a decoding or an encoding list in a particular microphase to a student, it gives me a, what would be goal for that student. And then I go on to the next list, and I'm looking to see where that student through error analysis kind of falls apart, and that's where I go. So the goal is not, and Steph, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I don't really think it's like a end of the year expectation. It's based on individual students,
Right.
moving that student along through their competencies at the pace that they're ready.
Right.
So, there might be some second graders that are still working on maybe short vowels or digraphs. And so they're getting explicit instruction in that, and then they're going to move on to the next skill. They might get to, I don't know, the floss rule and get one lesson and they're good. So there's no, it doesn't have to, even though a cycle is 5 lessons with that particular skill, we don't necessarily stay to that. So if you have 2 days of instruction and they're showing you, and those microphases are not whole group, right? They're so there's a whole group lesson that's on grade level, and then you're instructing your strategy groups through their particular microphase. So if it's 2 lessons and they move on, or sometimes they might need even more than that, we're not going to die on the short A hill. We'll keep moving, but then we'll keep revisiting. So it's hard to answer that, because I think it's moving at their pace, and their instruction is really targeted. We get much more targeted data from EL, or at least I do, than I ever got from iReady. iReady would give me a broad standard, but it wouldn't hone down.
It's not a great platform. Mike, so let me put it to you this way, and I don't have to have an answer here. I would like an answer at some point. How will we decide if the platform is doing what we want it to do? I mean, it sounds great, genuinely, but I also am going to want to see some data that says, yes, you know what, that every kid is making that an adequate yearly growth personalized for that kid. That's I'm not looking all child left behind. Let's see everybody hit the same level. But I would like to see, how are we going to know that this platform's the one for us, because our kids are moving the way we want them to move?
I agree.
Can I interject and ask and just say something? Is that okay, Deb? Sorry. And Stephanie. So Linda, one of the ways that I think that we can measure it too is by, yes, we want to see that the implementation of this program and the different resources the teachers have available to them are helping the students make progress. But then when we also do our DIBELS screener, because we use DIBELS as our benchmark screener, we want to see that they're making progress on grade level or closing the gap. So if they weren't on grade level, are they actually closing the gap or are they not? And Dibbles, through the Amplify digital platform that they have, shows you like trend lines. So your students that you're really concerned about, when you put in your progress monitoring data, you can see if their plotted points are towards their trend line and they're going to make that adequate progress, or if they're not. So I know for me, like that has been one piece that I found helpful. Is it is very challenging. Like it's and not challenging, but it's very different from the traditional ways of teaching that I always did. But I have found it comforting to be able to look at the Dibbles data and then say, are we actually closing the gap, or what are we starting to notice for some of the students? Because even with like the error analysis that you can do through Dibbles, through the oral reading fluency, you can see, well, did the student was really targeting like CVC and CVCE words. They got all those right. They got really hung up on the multisyllabic words, because then you can see that through that as well. So then you know that the instruction is actually working and the progress they're making with their fluency or accuracy is coming from their direct, instruction that they're having.
So
I'm not
really,
sure if that helps.
it's 100% does. So really the platform and EL is obviously informing instruction, but then we'll use the assessments and progress monitoring that we've always used to kind of keep track on, yeah, you know what, it is really working. And we know that because it's showing up on Dibbles or it's showing up. Cool. Thank you very much. Darcy out.
One of the concerns that have been expressed in the past was, especially grade 3, not having the phonetic skills when the program was introduced. And you gave an awesome summary of what's going on in K-1-2. Do we have something similar for at least grades 3, 3, 4, and 5, because we have all the other 3 grades that are also involved?
So
Or-
what we're currently doing is we are using some of the components of the grade 2 skills block and even the assessments from the skills block for the kids that need it, because not all of our students need that targeted instruction. But for those students that really need it, we are using some of the components from the skills block in order to be able to bring them to grade 3 so that we can really work on those areas that they might not be really there with yet. And then we are also looking into a phonics program that is embedded within KIDM to see if that can offer support, because that's another thing that, like I had said earlier, they listen to the teachers. This is not an RSD 13 struggle. This is a struggle pretty much nationwide that our grade 3 through 5th graders are really struggling with literacy. And they really need that extra phonics instruction, but it's not there for 3 through 5. So KIDM listened and they responded. And so now they have shared something that is a possibility of us bringing into smaller groups in order to really target that and be able to help support those learners that might need that kind of instruction.
So are you not using that now, or you are?
No, they are currently using it. Yes.
The KIDM part, the phonics part from KIDM that is for more of the upper elementary was just released recently. That did not come out last year or over the summer or at the beginning of the year when we were doing a lot of our professional learning. So one of the things that the teachers did do was they took with the help of our instructional coach, Shauna, they took the encoding assessment that broke it down into the alphabetic phases, and I'm probably going to get them incorrect. I don't know them as well as Stephanie and Deb and our coach, Shauna, but because the encoding or spelling comes usually after the decoding or reading the words, they gave that encoding assessment, which broke all the 3rd graders down into the alphabetic phases, I think, or maybe it's a microphase. No, I don't think it's a micro. I don't know. Maybe it is a microphase. I don't know. But broke it down there, and then they created their groups from there to target the instruction on those skills. So for example, if it fell in like the full alphabetic, maybe they're working on, I don't know, like R-controlled vowels or something like that. So that's what we did at the beginning of the year. So we're continuing that same focus and taking a look and reassessing the learners if we think that they have mastered those skills from those different alphabetic phases. Otherwise, we're just continuing that instruction in our small groups, both in intervention as well as with the tier 1 groups that the classroom teachers are running. And right now, the teachers are just trying to become more familiar with what KIDM has to offer for the phonics platform. Like, for example, one really great thing that I think they do for upper elementary is that they have goal trackers for the students through KIDM. So it says, like, during this micro phase, you know, they're working on this. Well, what will we have? What will I know by the end? And then it shows the students and lets them graph. Oh, I was able to meet, like, I don't know, what is it called? The word with the C, I don't, or series, I don't know. Something like that, like, you know, whatever the skill was exactly. I don't know all the exact lingo from EL, but they're able to say, I got this many words correct when I took my assessment. Now I'm going to move on to the next part of this phase. So it lets them track their performance through the micro phase, which I think is really nice to give them that ownership. And maybe that is a part of K2 as well. I'm not sure, but when we've dabbled in the 3-5, we've seen that here, which is really nice. So teachers are becoming more familiar with it.
Yeah, if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like you're really still like in the beginning phases of implementing this, so that it, you know, I don't know, how are you able to determine if you're having success, any successes, if this is working with the third
If we're having
graders?
success with EL, or if we're having success with
No,
our learning
with the
progress.
third graders in terms of bringing up their phonics skills and.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just like, and it's that's a great question. It's very similar to what I had said to Linda too, is we're still using our benchmark assessments through DIBELS and our progress monitoring to see that the students are applying those skills and are closing the gap if it's an intervention student or a student that we're concerned about their progress. And we haven't, everybody is on different phases, just like Deb and Stephanie said too. So they're mastering those different skills almost in the same order that they would have done previously when we were using more of like a phonics scope and sequence. And then we hope that then that transfers on when they go to do the benchmark assessment and actually get, you know, scores for accuracy, fluency, comprehension, and all of that. So we're using the DIBELS as our way to see that we are making the grade level progress and getting to that benchmark. And then we're looking at the actual data, like when we go to instruct them on, let's say, our controlled vowels, and then we go to give them words in isolation to write and spell, and as well as the spelling dictation sentences to then see if they can carry that over for the application piece. And that's what we use to then say, okay, yes, they met it. We might not be using the tool from KIDM, and I would hope that we can get there, because the less tools you're pulling out of your toolbox, the better, right? But right now they're following that trajectory, but using what they're familiar with.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that when we get the reports for the scoring that you've had in, let's say, at our next meeting, that we'll also have some data for the third grade of what's happening. We'll get data from that as well to see where, you know, how much progress has been made, where you're starting, where you might be now, how the students are doing.
We do have our benchmark data that we do through DIBELS. The other consistent data that we have is we do module assessments, not necessarily benchmark assessments like the K2. I don't know what kind of information you'd want for the assessments, but I can work together with, you know, Stephanie and our coaches.
I think we just want to see, is it making progress? Are the students making progress? And, you know, how is that determined? You know, you might tell us, but can we see it? You know? That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Stephanie, there's something more?
Well, the other piece of this, unless there weren't any other questions, was to have the grade 6 discussion.
Okay, are there any other questions so far? No, okay. I spent some time going through thank you for sending the link. I appreciated that. I went through grade 5. I went through grade 6 and started grade 7 to look at the focus books that they used, and then how how the lessons go. Now, I don't know, I know they have student workbooks. Are
Yep.
they using the workbooks in grade 5?
Grade 5, they are. The idea for grade 6 would be that we would not purchase the workbooks for the kids because they would be able to access the information from KIDM a little bit easier than our K-5 students.
Because when I went through the workbooks, I was quite impressed with all the skills that are put into each of the books, each of the areas that they cover. It was really great. I mean, there's writing. I mean, it obviously gets a little more complex as you go up to the higher grade levels. I think the concern that I had, and I think it was brought up at the last meeting, was the content of the materials that are used, not the reading skills, but the content. And I think what kind of concerned me was when we had 5th graders come in and they were talking about Esperanza Rising, and I just distinctly remember hearing one little girl say the Mexicans were being discriminated against. And then another child said the gringos discriminated against the Mexicans. And then they talked about the Human Bill of Rights. And it kind of took me by surprise, I guess. So that's why I went into this. I didn't go into Esperanza Rising, but I did go into the second book, which I believe they're in now, which is Jackie Robinson, if they've started that one already. And we have kind of like a racial theme in the first book, and there's another racial theme in the second book. And I'm not sure when you have materials like this, and if you continue on, there's other modules like in grade 6 that it sounds like they're talking about the space shuttle, but then it becomes an issue of race again. I'm not going to get into detail about it, but I guess my concerns are, we're talking about a reading series here, and I believe that the children need to know about their world. But I think having a couple of books in a row that are focused on the same thing, and what theme are they getting out of this? Because everything is the whites were against the Mexicans and the whites are against the blacks. And also, if you look at a number of these books, the main characters are boys, and the girls are, because of the nature of their particular culture, are really more in a subservient role and in a housekeeping role and stuff. So, I'm concerned about that. I mean, I think the program is excellent. I love the way they put out their skills and for the students, and they're varied and they're awesome. But I'm a little concerned about the content of the reading books. They do have science books in here as well. And but I guess they were not chosen for 5th grade. Anyway.
So what are you suggesting, Lucy?
I'm suggesting that if we're going to adopt this program, and we need to look carefully at the modules. There's 4 modules in each one, and look carefully. And if one of them talks about social issues, that's fine. You have one book with social issues. The other one should just deal with other non-social issues. It could be science, it could be whatever,
Can you give me an example of something that's not social?
I think what I'm talking about is discrimination and coming out with the same theme that.
So I think that the pushback would be that the theme is, and again, maybe space shuttle versus Mexican immigration. The themes are different, right? The theme is immigration. The theme is the space shuttle. Now, within each of those themes, there may be a discussion, as well there should be a discussion of how these different scientific or historical content themes, how they impacted people of the world. And so if it were a issue of look, this is a book it's called White Privilege. And then the next one is called Racism. I would 100% agree with you that we're looking at a myopic view of children's literature, but the idea of finding social issues within each different theme, I don't think that, and again, I'll also put out there the immense amount of money, research, brilliant people who've put together these programs that, you know, they are so well researched and thought out that we should think really long and hard before we start tinkering with them because of our personal inclinations.
And I think too, Linda, I think this comes about knowing that the fifth grade currently wasn't running social studies this year. So those modules were being tied to social studies. And I think that's why science wasn't picked for those modules, which I do understand in a lot of aspects. I think that a lot of the questions came out of the fact that we have a current pacing guide for fifth grade, and that pacing guide isn't currently, you know, if a parent's going to our curriculum tab and looking through the pacing guide for fifth grade, they're seeing the content and in that pacing guide that the child's getting for social studies. Well, we're currently not doing that. And I think that those modules didn't tie to what was currently in that fifth grade. And that's where that conversation, you know, started from.
Mhm.
I think it's a little different at sixth, unless we're changing master schedules to remove social studies, which I haven't heard is the idea. But I think that K through 4, or maybe even K through 3, it's a little different because they're still in subject matter. But if we're going to continue to have a schedule where we're not pulling, you know, an entire block of time to do social studies, then we should be looking at the modules if they're not going to align with pacing guides. I'm sorry, I keep losing my voice, guys. I'm getting there, but it's been taking a week.
If I can just address the modules that were selected, they weren't selected with the idea that social studies wasn't going to be taught. It actually, module 1 was something that when we had met with the representative, because again, the goal next year is going to be to add another module. We didn't want to jump into it. Getting through all 4 modules is very, very difficult, but the great thing about that 4th module is it is a module that covers all of the standards that have already been covered in modules 1 through 3. So if we can't get to module 4, that's okay. You know, in the opposite of that, if we felt like module 4 was really, really strong and maybe module 3 wasn't as strong, we could do module 4, but then we would have to go to module 3 and see what standards weren't covered in module 4 and find a way to cover those. But the rep had suggested, since we were only going to stick with 2 modules this year, to definitely do the first module, because that one really sets the stage and helps to expose the kids to those routines and those procedures and that structure that they're going to see year after year consistently. And then the other module that was selected was basically just a discussion amongst the literacy committee and the teachers last year. So that's kind of how those were decided, because all of the grades, I think most of them are doing modules 1 and 2 this year, with the exception of, I think, 1 or 2 grades were doing 3.
Are there additional modules that are available, or do they just have these 4 for each grade level?
They just have 4 for each grade level.
These particular 4. I just want to mention that, yes, you have to talk about society, and, you know, social issues are in the middle of everything. I understand that. On one of the modules for grade 6, it's Remarkable Accomplishments in Space Science is the title of it. And the key book is about these 3 Black women who are very good at math, and they actually had contributed a significant amount, but of course their contribution was not recognized. So, you know, that's what the book was, and that's fine. But then they also put in little excerpts of other things, and they were talking about President Kennedy and his support for the space program, and then the development of the space program. And then they got to another little article that said, and they have activities, reading activities that go along with this, moon dust and black disgust. And in these, I'm just going to pull a few of them out. there's a sentence, America's insensitivity to human life is a human disgrace. America does not honor and believe in the dignity and rights of Black people. And then you're spending.
Are those in quotes? Like,
24
are those in quotes? Are those quotes?
No, that's part of the article that the students would read.
Oh, right. So I'm just looking for the context, because generally you hear things like that are from primary sources, right? So like it's something that you're reading something. Oh, so during this time of the space race, when these women were working, that these are things that were said during that time. So
Right.
that's my
And
question.
if it was written that way, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but that's not how it was written. And if you have a chance to go in there, you could just, it's a
Yep.
very short little article. And there's even a statement here about one of the men that was in the article that said that they spend $24 billion for space exploration. And it says, and to dribble out sparse thousands to improve the human predicament down here on the ground. I mean, I had no problem with the space, and then I got to that article, and then the students are asked to write an essay on a Black and white world. I'm just not sure. I just have some concerns about that. Linda, the way you described it was exactly what I would have no issue with that. This is the way it was then. That's not necessarily the way it is now, but America spends 24 billion on space, but they don't spend anything on the poor people that are here on the ground. How much money does the United States give to poor countries around the world? I mean,
less than
I don't wanna
1%.
get into that.
Less than 1% of our budget.
But it's
Lucy,
a lot of money because we have other programs for subsidizing housing and medical. Anyway, I just felt that was a little bit too one way, and have Linda write it. She did a great job. And then later on, they even mentioned about in one of the stories, I believe it was in the Greek mythology, that women were kind of, put off to the side, and to make sure that the teacher mentions that, there's not any such thing as girl books and boy book, just to make sure that girls know that it's not the guys get all this and the girls get nothing. But then that's when I started to look at the other books, and I said, wow, I said, in 3 of these books, the women really don't even have a role. They're just kind of off on the sidelines. So, anyway,
But
that's
Lucy,
my concern.
but
But I think it's an excellent program.
Lucy, that is our history. That is our facts. That is
It's our history, but when you make a statement, America is.
See, I think there's a fine line too, because I actually teach in an inner city, and we had a conversation about this, where it all has to do with the context, and it also has to do with the discussions that are happening. And I think the discussions that are happening around this material are the most imperative thing that we can't be sure are happening. And we have to be very careful about making sure that we definitely are exposing and teaching about history as it actually was, but be careful that we are not breeding more hate in the process, because there's a fine line, and really the differences, the discussions, and the growth that has happened since then. And unless we have those discussions along with this material, then we have to be very careful about how the takeaway that is happening with this material. I think that this definitely is something to be talking about. And I wondered, Lucy, I missed that part because I did look over a lot of this. I wondered if can you share with the board the context? I know Linda was also saying too, it all has to do with how it's presented, but could you share that with us?
That whole article?
Yeah, just the part, or even highlight. Can you email it to us?
Sure, I can copy it.
Okay,
Thank you.
you.
Yeah, I can do that.
If I could jump in for a minute too, I want to go back to something Lindsay said a few minutes ago. Cheryl's not on with us, but if you recall, she was on in December and talked about her reasons and her staff's reasons for wanting to move this into 6th grade. And I want to reiterate, history and social studies in grade 6 will be taught separate from ELA. I don't know how that is germane to the rest of this conversation, but because Lindsay brought it up, and Noelle, do you want to say anything about what you're thinking about in 4th and 5th for next year? Or do you want
Thanks,
to wait?
Doug.
until
I
you-
appreciate that. That's the question I was asking, because I think, we have to look at it less if it's not what we're currently substituting social studies for. Just in my eyes on that one. So thank you.
As we work through the schedule for 4th and 5th grade here at Memorial, since it is like a change from what we currently have here at Memorial, we will be redoing the schedules. And it looks like it is done with keeping in mind where they've come K3 and where they're going 6-8 and what 6th grade will look like next year. But since I don't necessarily have something on paper to present to you, I don't necessarily feel comfortable right now, Doug, like sharing what the schedule will be, if that's okay.
No, I didn't mean the actual schedule. I just meant any thoughts about the history, social studies component being embedded with EL versus being something that could be taught alongside it.
Yeah.
Kind of like
so-
Lindsay was saying with 6th grade.
Yeah, so this year we did look at what we were able to accomplish and then what we weren't able to accomplish. So revisions were made to the way that to the instruction that was happening here, so that way, like for example, right now, instead in 5th grade, instead of doing the next science unit, right now students are doing some social studies content standards, but more through an inquiry lens where they have to determine, what has happened to some of, like today when I was in a 5th grade classroom, they were talking about the colony of Roanoke. So they were looking at the evidence back from what happened to the colony of Roanoke, and then we're making a claim evidence reasoning, which is something they've done in science, but they were using the social studies content to then decide what they think happened to the colony of Roanoke, because when the explorers got back there, there were no more colonists left there. So they were coming up with their own judgment based on the evidence there from different trade books that they had. So what we've done for the remainder of this year is had some breaks within the science units, just in the natural way that they fall of, science unit 2 to science unit 3, and have put in the social studies content that we'd be missing from the way that we have the EL, and based on what we thought would happen with the open studio blocks in the grade 5 design for this year, if that makes any sense. And then based on how it went this year and what content standards we needed to work on a little bit more, as well as what Shauna, our instructional coach, has gotten as far as information regarding the redoing, I don't know if that's a real word, the revisions to the social studies frameworks at the state level. She's taken that information, although it's still in draft form, and we've come up with a revision for 4th grade and 5th grade, where it seems like it'll be a little bit more the way, kind of like the way K4 has been doing it, whereas teachers might teach a social studies unit and then a science unit and then a social studies unit and a science unit. So you don't have both each day, but it's a going off and on rather than it being a daily thing. So that's what, that's kind of currently where we stand. I don't know if that answers your question at all. I'm sorry.
Do we think that
Thanks.
switching off some of the science content is losing their instruction in science? Are we concerned about that at all?
There were lots of additional lessons put in. We still can cover, and this was all done at PLCs with the 5th grade team and talking with the teachers, as well as like taking feedback and thinking of it from a global lens of what is exactly are they supposed to come away with for grades 3 through 5 as in the area of social studies. The science is still being taught. We haven't gotten rid of any of those units at all in any way, shape, or form. However, like we might be revising or getting rid of some of the lessons that were taught in addition to the current curriculum that we have for grades 4 and 5. So obviously, like we have not come to any complete consensus about what it'll be, which is why I'm hesitant to actually like speak on it or put a schedule forward. But that's the way the units were kind of devised for K-5 for science and social studies, is that you would be teaching one and then like a science, and then teaching a social studies, and then a science and a social studies, because in a typical day, you don't have time to get both done. There's just not enough time to
I'm
devote.
sorry,
and-
I have to go pick up my
Oh.
son, but I just didn't want to jump off.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Deb.
Bye.
And I know we need to move on. I just wanted to make sure that, I've said this at previous meetings, that with Noelle and her team and Cheryl and her team, I know we're talking about the EL program right now, but one of the things that I think we're all committed to is putting a greater emphasis on English language arts and mathematics in grade 6, in grade 5, in grade 4, and what Noelle and I, and maybe some others, I don't know, we're brainstorming right now is how to leverage the reconfiguration decision and the fact that we'll have all 4th and 5th graders under one roof. How can we best go from a single teacher model, which is prevalent up through 3rd grade and we expect to continue, and have that transition to what they'll need like in 7th and 8th grade. So it's really neat. We're kind of almost looking at 4, 5, and 6 as this kind of upper elementary, early middle school continuum where you're breaking away from the single teacher teaching every subject, but we're not quite ready for like the high school, upper middle school, one teacher, one subject model. And I think there's a lot of promise here. And so I just want to, I don't mean to make that a teaser for not being able to show you every detail. I know Cheryl's working on hers as well. We'd love to show you that stuff in the next few months as it's developed.
Sounds good. Any other thoughts or comments, questions? Okay, we can go to item number 6, evaluation update.
Okay, this will be quick because I gave you a lot the last time and I'm being mindful of everybody's time. So
A lot was done the last time.
yes, well, we had a meeting yesterday, so we've gotten even further. So the full PDEC met yesterday, and I say the full because, like I said, we had so many people that were interested in helping out with this committee that we then also created a subcommittee that meets monthly. So the last time the full committee met was in November, and then we met again yesterday. And basically, we spent time reviewing the drafted process and timeline, as well as the forms that the subcommittee has created over the last 2 months. And that information has kind of been drafted based on the feedback that we got from the full committee in November. So we're really keeping that collaboration in mind as we're starting to make some changes and some additions to our evaluation plan. So at the meeting yesterday, we had individuals in small groups in order to basically take a look at all of those things and then to document their feedback on the Google slide. So far, the feedback that I read is it's really good. People seem to be overall very pleased with the process, the timelines, and the Google forms that we've created. And they're very excited about it. They think that this is going to be a change in the right direction. There's just little minor things now that we're going to take a look at fixing and adding based on the conversations that we had. But we had a lot of really good input come in yesterday. So now the next step is Matt and I, so Matt Tabor is the co-chair with me. We are going to be meeting almost weekly from here until May to continue having those conversations just about what we feel needs to be done. And then our subcommittee is meeting again on March 12th. And what we are going to do at that meeting is we're going to take the feedback that was provided to us at the meeting yesterday, and we are going to sit down and start making some of those changes and having some conversations, as well as talking about some of the things that we haven't yet had time to go into great detail about. We are going to be working on our consensus protocol because that's something that we really want to make sure the whole group is in consensus of the direction that we're going and the things that we're putting in place. And then our next full PDEC meeting is going to be on April 22nd, where we will again kind of take a look at, now that we've made some changes based on the feedback, what do we think about this, and get some more input. And then our subcommittee, if needed, will meet once more that following Thursday, the 25th. And we are hoping to bring it to you all for a vote at the May 8th meeting. And the reason for May 8th is because if approved, we would like to start sending information out to all staff members. The way we kind of think about the training and just giving them exposure to this, to not be so overwhelming, is for this school year to be able to give them information on the process and timeline and the forms. And then for next year, for us to be able to speak more to the Google Drive and how submitting Google Forms or the Google Docs, how submitting that information is going to look like. So we felt if we separated that, it wouldn't feel so overwhelming. And then in terms of next year, because we've been having a lot of discussions on, what are we going to continue doing? Obviously, we're going to continue collecting feedback about how individuals feel the plan is going, and make any modifications to it as necessary. But we also talked about creating a separate goal setting form for individuals who may need to be put on a tiered support, if any. And then we are also going to continue reviewing more standards to hopefully bring more differentiation in terms of the rubrics that we're going to be using for the evaluation process. So that is your update for this month.
Very good. Excellent.
I hope we're on the right direction, Linda.
Well, it's hard to say considering the
I
state
know.
has no rubric.
I know.
Okay, item number 7 is competencies update.
Do you want to start or do you want me to start? Okay.
All right, so throughout the last few months, we have been working on building competencies for our learners in the areas of math, ELA, and our overarching competencies as well. And our next steps for that is to work on the implementation plan for said competencies. We are also going to bring the competencies to the teacher. We have brought the competencies, the math and ELA competencies, to our instructional coaches, to our interventionists, and to our leadership team to review. And we would now like to bring them to the teachers for review of those math and ELA competencies that are written currently K through 8 and then 9 through 12 is in the work. And then as for the overarching competencies, we are planning on bringing those to the leadership team. We brought those to the leadership team, and we plan on bringing those next to our competency-based team to look through and get their feedback on. Once we have those set, we are hoping to then move into making an implementation plan that will be scaffolded and stepwise to make sure that everyone is on board with the implementation. Of course, this is a process. It is not an overnight change. And so we will be looking for different ways to implement throughout the district, starting off small and then growing these competencies.
And I will add on to that, saying that one thing that we talked about at our coaches and interventionist meeting a month ago was for next year our goal is to really get into a PLC to talk about these at least once a month. And other than really taking a deep dive and looking through them and making sure that they're appropriate and that they're accurate, but also to start having those discussions about what this is going to look like in the classroom and, just to get their feedback on how they feel they can embed this within their classroom, and then also just any guidance from us. But that's kind of the goal next year to roll this out is really, and we do have some teachers already who have expressed that they're really eager to kind of jump into this. And if Jen Penny is somebody that I think right now she is really doing a lot of this work in her classroom currently. But we do have some other teachers who are ready to roll and are eager to start using playlists and really start to embed these competencies within what they're doing next year. So we have had a lot of conversations. It is a lot. It's a lot to take in, but we are being very mindful of the way that we are going to be rolling this out with the staff.
We are also looking at other examples from other districts that have had implementation plans. There are some online from different consultant agencies, different districts that can help guide. We can talk with other districts who have implemented and see what their pros and cons were to the steps that they made. And we are looking to make sure that we are, like Stephanie said, mindful of the different steps we're going to take. So we're looking at different avenues to find the best way to do that within our district.
So I'm going to assume this is going to come before the board as well, be explained to the board for approval before it gets implemented.
Doug?
I'm not muted. I'll make sure I'm not muted. Yes.
Well, I guess I'd ask for clarification on that, Lucy. I think what we want to do is through this committee and then the whole board is explain where we'd like to go with all of this. I don't view this as something that's a one-shot approval and then it happens and everybody does it. I think it's more of a progression. I think that's why the Jen Penny example was given, because we can ask you all to approve the competencies, and I think that would be a great step. But the competencies are all rooted, and again, I don't want to misspeak here, so Stephanie lies to correct me, like the math and ELA ones, they're all rooted in the state standards and also in the Common Core standards. So we're not creating any new learning standards. We're creating a different system by which the learners themselves can progress through them, which is a little bit different than what I would call the pacing guide model, where it's more based on what the teacher does every day. And so, yes, we want the board's buy-in absolutely on that. But I don't, and this is where I think Liza talked about other districts. I don't think you can say to teachers, this year you taught this way, next year you're going to be competency-based. I think that'd be a recipe for disaster. Someday, yes, maybe. I think it starts with, let's run with the runners, the Jen Pennies and others, and let them blaze the trail so that the others know that this isn't such a scary place to be. That's been my experience with this work other places, and that's what I would certainly advocate for us. But I'd have to say, I didn't think we'd be at the point we are now where we'd have even these draft competencies in these content areas to even be showing to teachers and other staff. And if the board wants this group to bring those drafts to this committee or to a full board meeting, I think we would gladly do that. They're not a secret or anything like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think that makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
and I think some of the hesitancy comes from wanting to know the difference between where we're experimenting versus where we are sure that the kids are getting what they need in that year, and we're not having to backtrack from years ahead. So anything that can be shown to the board that we can have that buy-in to know that we feel confident that what they're going to be doing next year. Now, we can all say Jen Penny all day long because we know how fabulous she is and she's done so great there this year. But I wonder, as like a whole district, do we feel confident that every person could be a Jen Penny and it would be successful for that year? I just want to make sure every kid by the end of the year is successful. And I think that's why we have rubrics and why we have pacing guides. And I think it's hard for the board to see that without knowing a middle and an end. And again, I'm going to lose my voice if I talk anymore, but if that helps.
No, I agree. And I think, having a pacing guide, in my experience, has never guaranteed that anything is learned. All it guarantees is that content is taught. And I think what a competency-based approach comes at it from the learning side and says, you're all going to learn this, but you may be learning it on different days of the week in different spaces. And that is such a contrast from where we are now. And so I think you're right, Lindsay. And I think we hold out Jen Penny not as you have to be a Jen Penny to do some of this, but to say we need some more Jen Pennies to kind of set the examples for others, so it's demystified a little bit for this. It might be scary for the board, it might be scary for some parents. It's scariest for teachers. The teachers have to buy into this, and they have to feel confident that they can do it. And I think that's where we just have to go, really, as a district, at the pace that we're all comfortable with, and that includes the board.
Right, and I think that's the hard part, is getting everyone on that same, you know, buggy moving forward in the right time frame, in knowing that. But I think we're definitely onto something, you know, that I think that there might be some disconnect of understanding, and I think the more we can give and the more we can talk about, the better.
No, I agree. And she left, but she did such a great job, Deb Mariani. I think even in her describing what was happening with this EL program, it's one of the reasons we picked it. It has embedded some of these competency-based practices into it, and it's making it easier for the teachers to do this. I mean, with us going to EL, with us going to reconfiguration, the last thing we want our elementary teachers thinking is that we're going to throw something else brand new at them next year. We want them to see how this really makes sense with what they're already doing. And so we're very, very cautious about saying we're going to jump into anything like this overnight.
Okay. Any other comments,
Sounds good.
thoughts? Okay, moving on. Thank you, Deb, for waiting.
All good.
High school pathways.
So it's all good. I actually think, like, even though I did ask Doug originally if we could move it, I think this is perfect. Like, we started with the K2 in this meeting, and we're ending with where we are in high school. So I do really like that. I shared our draft Health and Human Services Pathways document with you. And I do have because I'm better with visuals, I do have a quick little, I swear it's only 5 slides. Can you guys see that?
Oh, yeah.
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. So it's really 5 slides. I'm just better with visuals, so I don't forget anything. And I'm open to questions at the end. But where Liza and my group is, we started with the Health and Human Services pathway because we have existing classes and existing staff that really fit well into, you know, I won't call it a box, but into a path. And so with our sciences and our maths and some other things, we decided to start with our Health and Human Services. And once we got our feet under us with Sal, the team really worked well together to create that document that you see. One of the reasons that it's still written as draft is because we need real pictures. Those are not our kids, clearly. Some of them are just graphics. So, for example, Craig, this Friday, I believe, in fire science, he is holding a live burn so the kids can learn how to use extinguishers. And so we're going to go out and take some pictures and add some real pictures to that. I want that to be authentic. I want it to be our kids. So the way we kind of ended up landing out was, you know, right now we're thinking 3, there might be more, but Health and Human Services. But then when we looked at our paths, we really saw 3 separate concentrations: health services, human services, and government law and public administration. And we had everyone at the table. We had social studies teachers, science teachers, tech ed teachers. So, you know, we wanted to take what exists and kind of just couple it. That's really where we started. We didn't create something brand new. We took what we already had, went with the board's graduation requirements, and then tried to fit everything in, which is the graduation requirement policy is another conversation we're going to have someday soon, because the state, and I can't see Linda, but I'm sure is probably shaking her head, the state keeps changing their mind on the number of credits and what we have to have and that kind of stuff. So that document that you see it's not finished. We're going to share it. Kids already registered for classes this year, but we are going to share it with the kids and the families at the end of this year, because classes can always be switched. Freshman classes are pretty well set, except for doubling up in science. So, you know, if a kid is like, I really have to do this, we have a lot of flexibility to move a kid around. We also want to give our upperclassmen some ability to take some of these classes. Sorry, I'll go back to this because I'm still talking about this. To take some of these classes, whether articulated or not, or just to get experience in the pathway, right? They don't have to finish a pathway. There's no certificate from us necessarily, but if they want to try exercise science because it's a 3-credit class that Mike Brady might teach, because they think they want to go into athletic training or physical therapy or something like that, of course we're going to, you know, let kids take it. They don't have to finish a pathway, start and finish. There's an off-ramp every time. So the Friday before the long weekend, the group came back together, and again, it was pretty much the same group, but we invited Ryan Donaker because the business pathway really, he's our department of one, as you guys probably know. And as we kind of parsed it out, we saw like 3 not very different, but 3 different ways to go in business. There's marketing, business administration, and finance. And then they got stuck, and Doug knows they got stuck because on his wall in his conference room is still the handwritten notes that even when I used his conference room today was still there. And we actually had a conversation about it because I had to leave at the end of the meeting. So what happened was, after a couple hours of work, and we really kind of, again, coupled things together that needed to go together, we were like, but this is truly an elective pathway. And then we were like, but is it an elective pathway? You know, they only have to take 3 years of math. There's a prescribed way we take math now, but maybe data analysis or statistics is your 4th year of math because you're interested in finance. Like, those are some of the things that we have to work out from our core classes. We are piloting the Intro to Macroeconomics class this semester, actually, with Mrs. Noheimer, and you know, it's actually a social studies class. I have my undergrad in economics. It's a social science, so it can count as a social studies class. Right now, and this is why I said about our graduation requirements. Right now, students are, you know, they have to take Western Heritage, and they have to take U.S. history, and they have to take the senior class to graduate. It's not ethics, but it's like ethics. And so they really have 2.5 that they're required to take, but we want them to take 4 years of social studies. So then we kind of say, well, does everyone have to take the typical ones, or can Intro to Macroeconomics, which is a social studies class, fit into this? The criminal law class, that's also in the Health and Human Services pathway. I think she calls it civil law. You know, does that fit into here? You know, there are some law components of being in business or being in finance that you may need to know, depending on what you want to do with it. So we should have a document like the one you see for Health and Human Services by the end of the school year. That's our goal. It depends a lot when we can get together. And Erica Anderson does a lot of work with putting the things in, and then we get feedback from everybody in the district. The one thing we did decide to go ahead and do is we have 7 courses that we're going to articulate next year. So kids can take any of these 7 courses, and you'll see they're not just in our Health and Human Services pathway. So it's called Criminal Justice in this one. And we're going to work with the University of Bridgeport. So 7 different teachers are working directly with 7 professors from the University of Bridgeport to offer the 3-credit classes. It's $50 per credit, so it's $150 if the student decides to articulate. But you'll see, like that chemistry class, kids are going to take chemistry anyway. So if it's the University of Bridgeport articulated class, they can get credit for it by paying $150. But we're not going to require, just because they're in that class, that they have to articulate. But again, after a long conversation, it wasn't that long, but a long conversation today during the end of the other meeting we had, like, if you guys remember going to college, like, though your grades get reported, the important part is that you got the credits, right? Like, I will tell the quick story of I thought I was going to be an engineer, and I didn't take physics in high school. I know, bad choice. I know now. And I was going to fail it my freshman year of college. And my professor said to me, listen, I'll make a deal. You change your major, and I'll make sure you get your 3 credits and you don't have to pay for 3 more credits. And I was at Fairfield. So my father was very thankful that I didn't have to pay for the 3 extra credits. So, not that I want kids to not do well, but they can get a C and get their 3 credits. So it's not, we are keeping this for all levels of kids. It doesn't have to be necessarily our highest level kid.
Will
So
there,
go ahead.
is,
Those are all my slides. I'm going to undo this. Go ahead.
is there a plan for kids who maybe qualify for free or reduced so that the tuition is subsidized?
100%. Our really hard part with free and reduced is, as you know, I'm not allowed to know. So they would have to reach out to us, but we would probably put it out there. If you have a financial need, please reach out, because we can ask the question. We just can't research the question. I had a situation where a kid needed a lunch, and Robin, who is by the book and really good at what she does, said, I need to talk to the student. I'm like, okay. So she talked directly to the student about what she needed to do to go get her lunch. I'm guessing because she was free or reduced. I don't know, because, Robin,
Yeah.
and that's great. That's the way it's supposed to be. So,
Thank
but yes, there is a plan in place for that.
Deb,
Yeah.
have you looked at, I was looking at the Health and Human Services. Have you looked at the staffing requirements to meet this? And, some of these
Just
things, it seems like there'd be an awful lot of time that is taken, between your junior and senior year that you're gonna have to balance whatever else you're taking to get some of these courses in.
So we did, and that was one of the things, and I understand it so much better now. I'm a puzzle person.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things Liza, Katie, and I spent a little bit of time on, and had Craig down and kind of talked about some of these things. We have to make sure if we offer this, we have the people to teach it, right?
Yeah.
And that's why we based it on the classes we sort of have now. So that exercise science class, we do not have, but we do have room in the PE and health schedule with our people to be able to dedicate a class to Mike Brady for exercise science. That can also be, Liza, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if we're going with health or PE on that one. Probably PE if they really want it. There's different places to put it for requirements, but they only require 1 year of PE and 1 year of health in the state of Connecticut, which, oh my God, Linda, that's so cute. So, we did it with not people's names, but positions. And so we are all set for the ones that you see right there, Bob. We have the staff for it. And I know you've been asking this question, all along. Do I see the need for more staff when we build that business pathway and the engineering manufacturing? I do. I think we're going to need it. And that's why I want to get this business one built and get the engineering one started, so that next year when I come to you guys, I can have a reason why we may or may not need to either move staff because we have some dual certifications, right? Or, we add some 0.4s where we already have a 0.6 or things like that. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, it seems to me from knowing that, having lots of grandkids go through here, there's going to be a lot of times. I think it seems to me we need more staff to meet these goals, and especially if you add another pathway. And the other thing I was concerned about, if you present this pathway to freshmen, and are they going to assume this is the only pathway?
No.
Or is there going to be something else presented to them that says, look, you don't have to choose this pathway. These are other courses, and will they be confused that they're not in a pathway if you start this year without the other ones being developed?
Right. That's really where our counselors come into play. And we had a breakfast, coffee with admin, and 5 parents showed up. I was thankful for the 5 parents, but, we talked a lot about the pathways. I had Matt come down. And that was one of the questions. But when I went down to do 8th grade registration, one of the little girls had our pathway document. She's like, I want to take all of these. And I said, that's fine, but there are going to be more. So when we roll it out in advisories, say the beginning of next year or to the 8th graders, I want to have control is the wrong word. I want my staff to have control over the messaging. While these are 3 pathways you can take if you're interested, there are lots of other things we can take and lots of off ramps and lots of things to dabble in. If you're not sure, take intro to marketing, take, electronic music, we think electronic music, something like that fits nicely into our engineering technology pathway when we start to think about it. It can be one of the electives in there. So no, I want to have control over the narrative, because I agree, like Bob, I don't want them to think it's this or nothing. You know, I want the message to be clear. And actually, Katie and Liza are really good at that messaging piece. They'll probably make I made this one, by the way, but they'll probably make my slides presentation, the one for the kids. And then they usually show it to me, because if I'm confused, then we just fix it. You know what I mean? Like, that's how we try to roll this when we work on stuff like this. So I want to make sure they do know that what their options are, or no options, right? Like, not, I don't mean that like, but like a liberal arts kind of way through. If you want to just take all your typical, if we have them ECE, and we will have ECE, I'm thinking of one we may not have next year, but your typical ECEs, APs, and whatever, we're not taking those away at all. They will be there. AP has go ahead, Liza, I see what's like. AP has a different kind of credit associated with it than an articulated class. So you get something for those APs too. So AP chemistry, well, you may not get 3 credits. If you pass the test, you're going to be able to maybe, depending on where you go, get your credits for that in your school. Go ahead, Liza.
Another thing we did is we have the career cluster interest survey that our students take. They take in middle school and in high school as well. And we have the results from that. And interestingly, for the class of 2024, 27, the highest was STEM and manufacturing and IT. It's a cluster report, but 30 were in there, and health and human services was just behind that with 27. And then underneath that is business, marketing, and finance. So we know we are on the right path as we make these pathways as to what our students are maybe interested in. And in addition, with that data, we can target those students who have that as their career cluster. Not to say that not anybody can do any pathway that they choose, but if they so choose that on their career inventory, then the counselors can know that and can target and say, hey, just so you know, your career cluster was business, and we are starting up this business pathway. Why don't you take a look at this? Let's talk through that to really help them and target their interests.
Deb, how does it look for the upcoming? Oh, I'm sorry, Bob. For the upcoming
courses.
Sorry, Bob, what?
I was wondering if you were dropping the UConn credit courses.
We're not. We have they're teacher specific. We may be dropping one. We didn't run it this year because the teacher took a leave of absence. And so I don't know if we'll be running it next year because it is teacher specific. And I don't know whether or not she's returning. So if she returns, we'd like to try to run it, but she doesn't need to tell us until April 1st. So it puts us a little bit in a bind because we didn't put it on the program of studies because we don't have anyone to teach it.
And the UB, University of Bridgeport, I thought they were bought by Quinnipiac, by the way.
So what's funny about that is I looked it up today because when I went to Fairfield, I remember they were with the Unification Church. I think it was called the Unification Church. I knew them as another group. And they parted ways with the Unification Church in 2019. And it just said that they were sort of independent, but I wouldn't be surprised at all, Bob. I wouldn't be surprised, which is Quinnipiac is another one that it has, right, Liza, has offered to, we just don't have any of their classes.
No, it's a partnership with Goodwin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just didn't think the University of Bridgeport still existed. So it was odd that that's kind of in the course stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And that they all transferred to Connecticut. So I'm sure Linda knows with the whole new state, like, credit, like, I don't know, Liza, what's it called? Consortium. What do they call it? Oh, like all together, it's the CT.
Which one are you meaning?
When all the
community colleges
got together. What is that whole thing called?
CTC.
Yeah. And so, all these credits will transfer between most Connecticut schools. I think some private schools can say no, but if you're in Connecticut, they don't. Sometimes when you go out of state, they just don't transfer. And that's, you can appeal and try to transfer, but those are just the way it works.
And that can be from any university. Every university has their own way of doing transfer credits, and even some UConn ECE courses may not transfer to some out-of-state universities. So it's all up to those universities of where someone's going.
Okay,
Deb, do you have any indication in surveying the 8th graders or their course selection, how they're looking towards the pathways at all? I don't know if I missed it. I'm sorry.
So no, Liza did say that they will do their inventory career clusters, because really your freshman year, you're so sort of locked, excuse me, locked into your classes except for a few electives. But we will know that before they come in. And if there is an elective that they'll fit into, i.e. exercise science for health and human services, and we don't have enough kids in it, we can hand select those kids or speak to those kids, because they won't know, this is like an insider thing. They won't know what their schedules are until after we're done with the schedule. So let's say a kid right now has ceramics or something. I'm going to send something less glamorous because I couldn't have ceramics as a freshman. Marketing essentials, but they really have come up that they are interested in health and human services. Then we would look to see period 2 where that class was. If there was something in the health and human services pathway, I'd have the counselors look at that and just change their elective. They chose like 15 electives. We made them choose a whole bunch, because I'm really trying to get away from study halls, and I don't want to just put them into classes that I know they don't want. So they picked, like 6 primary, and then like whatever adds up to 50, 11. No, I did it wrong. 9 secondary, so that we at least have an idea what they're interested in should we have to move their class.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. And it was neat to see both my kids come home with it, because they could see what they chose in the primaries, but then the secondaries. So it does give you some indication where, there's some preference for different subject matter. So I think that's great. I think it's challenging for the high school, and this might be something that, if we could articulate to the board too, or whether we think that there's going to be any scheduling conflicts, or, are we confident that a child can continue in what they're currently doing and don't have to give something up in order to take a pathway. And I think parents will be really interested to see that too, and be confident that, if they start in 9th grade, that they can continue on and not come to like junior year and say, now, I can't take AP chemistry because I'm interested in the human services pathway. Again, that might combine in with it, but I think it's good to look at.
No, absolutely. I hear you. And that's why I want to give these kids the opportunity, the older students, the opportunity to take some of them. Like they can look at these pathways, but they might not get every elective, excuse me, every elective that we have listed under there. You know what I mean? Because I'm never going to ask them to give up their art class or the music class or another thing that they're passionate about, unified. I'm just not going to ask them to, not going to ask them to do. Like I said, until we get to the point where we're writing something on their transcript, this is for them to be able to say when they apply to a college, I graduated, from Coggins Regional High School under the Board of Education's criteria, but I really took like all these classes in manufacturing and IT. Like this is my passion. I do like it. Or the opposite, right? I tried this. I don't want to do this. So now maybe I'll do something else. It's like your first job. When you got your first job and you were like, oh yeah, this is gonna be great. And then you hated it. And then you learned what you didn't want to do again later. That was me. So you just, that's what I'm hoping these kids can figure out, because it's a great time to do it. My neighbor used to say, it's all free. And I said, it's not free, but yeah, it's a good time to try things out, right?
right.
Yeah, no, I give you guys so much credit. I've never, there's so many moving parts of this, and I know, just looking what, Matt Thompson and how wonderful he is, and it's a great team up there. And it'll be interesting to see how we're able to incorporate, SPED within those pathways too. And I never want to discourage someone who, struggles, under an IEP to feel like they can't be successful in a pathway too. And I know that's going to be really difficult for, us to do it. And I just think it's going to be so important, and it should really help.
And I agree with that. I do think that there are some students, and I keep going back to exercise science just because it's not chemistry. Like I know some students that might have an IEP that can be extremely successful in a class like exercise science. and they should have the opportunity to earn 3 credits like everybody else can. And I think to your point, Lindsay, I think we need to look at that, because a lot of these learners are going off to college, IEP or not, 504 or not. They are going to go, and they need to know the rigor, and they need to know how to navigate it. And again, what better time to learn than in high school? Because if they don't want to articulate and they just want to try, go ahead, try. And then they're going to pass and be like, can I articulate it now? Liza's looking into that.
And I think in every career too, there's always going to be something, a position for somebody, no matter what their level of competency is in those careers too. So someone that might be looking to be a high level, scientist, within, like a chemistry, and someone that wants to work within the field, but not within the numbers. So I think it gives a lot of wiggle room in a career pathway. So
I agree. So yeah. And so if you guys have any other like specific feedback or questions, feel free to email them to me. My hope is to get you the business one and a draft, maybe a draft. I don't know, Liza, if we'll get that far, of the manufacturing one. If I can come back, toward May, even June, if it's a light month. I don't know if that's what it'll be, but Doug and I will pick a light month and hopefully have those done, or at least be able to give you an update.
How are you getting
that
this
sounds great.
information out to the parents? How are you getting the information out to the parents or students? You can, students.
I question myself because I don't remember if I sent it out in a parent square and just said we had it. I don't think I did, because I think I wanted to share it with you guys first. So we did it. We had the team check it. We sent it out to my staff, and they really ran their eyes over it as far as grammar and punctuation. That was a great conversation. Like, is there periods or is there not periods? And is this capitalized or is this not capitalized? So I think I would like to couple it with telling the kids, or sharing the presentation we give to the kids with the parents along with that piece of paper. And if I could have, to Bob's point, if I can have 2 with a coming soon attraction for the third one, that all kind of goes together toward the end of the year, then they can reach out to Matt. They can reach out to me. They can reach out to their counselors. And, oh my gosh, my kid would really love to do this. Did they pick the right classes? Like, we'll figure it out. That's how I see it. Liza, am I speaking incorrectly? Okay. The team has been great. The team, I can't even tell you, like, Doug's been there for a couple of meetings, but this last meeting when it was just the team and no outside people, no offense, Doug, like, they really got the work done, and it was fabulous to see. Like, we didn't get
some real fast.
Yeah.
Just the moving parts and figuring out where things should go. Having done the first one, like I think with anything, having done the first one and then coming through a second time, it was really, really great to see all the opinions and parts being put into place. So it was a good time.
I'll make sure to stay away more often so you can get more work done.
It's okay. Sometimes we get philosophical when you're around. It's okay with me, but sometimes.
Yeah,
So
it would be
it
would be neat to, and I had this conversation with, I've been trying to meet with different boards and commissions in both towns, and slowly, month to month. And, one of the things from the seniors that they had said was, oh, wow, this is happening. How cool is that? And I thought to myself, we tell the parents, we tell the kids, but it'd be nice if we can get something out, we get a newsletter out talking about these pathways, and it gives us a lot of buy-in with the community, and it gets these seniors excited to be involved in sharing their life stories and the knowledge that they have in their lives. So I know the seniors are eager to work with the kids too. So it'd be great if we could figure that out, the next couple months.
Yeah, absolutely. I see them being at the library in some sort of form so people can pick them up at the libraries. The other thing I think you're going to see, our second year at Capstone, if you guys haven't signed up or reached out to Matt, those are coming on March 8th. We have some fabulous things going on. We have some good things going on. The kids did such a obviously second year of anything. Matt was more prepared. The kids are more prepared. The kids knew what they were doing it for. And I think anything that you can come see, even if you can only come to one, and let Matt know that, I welcome you on the afternoon of the 8th. I think the Pathways thing is going to tie in tight to Capstone, and it's a really great opportunity for these guys. So just my little plug for our Capstone. I think most of you are signed up, but if you can come in the afternoon of the 8th, It's gonna be great.
Yeah, I enjoyed it last year. I was impressed, very impressed. So I'm sure I'll be more impressed this year. Awesome, this is great. This is really exciting. Okay, any other thoughts, comments? Okay, we're at item number 9, which is adjournment. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor, aye. Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Had a great meeting.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.